Hey everyone, welcome to a journey of manufacturing resilience, a discussion about automated, adaptive, and autonomous production. My name is Dave Griffith. You guys might know me from Manufacturing Hub, and I'm very excited to have Chris Stevens, SVP and GM of US automation business Siemens Digital Industries. A very impressive title, Chris. We expect a lot from you. And a person with no less of a very impressive title, we've got Jeff Burnstein, president of A3, the person we can thank for the fantastic event that we are all here today. So, welcome both of you guys. I am very excited to go ahead and do a bit of a deep dive into the autonomous production, talking about manufacturing resilience. I do want to make note, especially for our listeners at home, there are two parts of an MIT Technology Review Insights report that came out. Part one, a vision for the future of automation, and part two, the business of the future is adaptive. I believe both of those first two parts are out now, and maybe through the magic of the internet, we will go ahead and get all of those posted in the chat during this for you guys to go ahead and take a look at. I want to go ahead and dive in. I want to talk about setting the stage, and I want to come to you first, Chris. From your side, setting the stage. Can you tell us a little bit about what manufacturing resilience is, and maybe can you help us define the path of automation to adaptive and to the autonomous journey, please?
Yeah, sure. I think resilient manufacturing is probably front and center with everybody's mind. If you go back just 5 years with what happened with COVID
Yep.
and the supply chain disruptions, to be able to manage that
Mhm.
and have robust, flexible capabilities to manage those disruptions and keep operations continuously going, that's resilient manufacturing. And then now,
Absolutely.
of course, fast forward to today, and now we have the tariff issue, right?
Yes.
So, and then of course equipment failures or whatever, right? So,
Yes.
so that's resilient manufacturing. Is are you building those into your operations
Mhm.
to handle those large disruptions?
Agreed.
Then you talked about let's talk about AI for a minute because that's why we have these kind of different stages.
Yes.
That's what's really pushing the envelope on these different stages. AI is a very innovative and disruptive technology that we're seeing today. I always like going back in history and looking at history lessons. If you
Yep.
look at the printing press and what the printing press did to
Yep.
society is taking that knowledge to the masses
Mhm.
and really changed the way we learn as an organization, as a society. Massive changes to society. The next one would be the assembly line. We're
Yep.
in Detroit, so we
Yes,
have to talk about Henry Ford and the
we
assembly
do.
line, and so bringing those products more readily available to us and more affordable changed the way we live. We
Yeah.
can now live 20 minutes from our work or go
Mhm.
different places on the weekend. I mean, completely just changed society.
Agreed.
And of course, the internet.
Mhm.
If you look at the internet, now information is readily available to us at our fingertips.
Yep.
We can communicate real time,
Mhm.
sometimes too much when it comes to social media, right? So we're
Yeah.
trying to figure that out
Yep.
as a society, obviously. But those massive changes, the biggest thing we learn between those innovative technologies is the companies that won,
Yep.
and actually in some cases stayed alive,
Mhm.
were the innovators and the leading adopters.
Mhm.
And so that's what you're seeing with AI. And so with
Yep.
AI today is very much is front and center. It's almost every conversation in
Yep.
every conference room that we're having.
Mhm.
And then what we do then is we first want to kind of start and contain that and say, look, we have the automation phase,
Mhm.
right? That's the fixed programming, kind of limited ability to change. Everybody's doing something as it relates to that. We just want to understand where you're at in that
Yes.
journey
Mhm.
and work with you there.
Mhm.
Then as you move into adaptive, now this is where AI starts coming to the
Yep.
picture, right? And so that's where you start talking about things like Copilot and those kind of things where you have human in a loop
Yep.
and you're talking to machines about what's really happening and you're changing the conditions based on existing information that you're getting. That's the adaptive
Absolutely.
piece. And then of course autonomous is this kind of lights out factory machines talk to machines. So that's a little bit out there, but definitely something that maybe some companies are saying within 5 to 6 years we need to look at something like that. So especially in the semiconductor industry. So
Absolutely.
it's very interesting times right now. But the important piece for us is let's just understand where you're at.
Yep.
If you're a small medium enterprise company in your automation phase, we'll work you through there. We'll introduce the technology as it makes sense. And if your goal is to get to adaptive, we'll work with you there as well. That's why it's important to kind of break these different stages down.
Absolutely, and I really like the different stages, and I think they're important. I think when we get to autonomous, that is maybe a little bit scary, like just the word, and we will go get to that in a couple of minutes. But I want to come back to Jeff, and so Jeff, I feel like we talk about all of these terms and we talk about AI, and there are so many of these workforce questions. So from your perspective, from the workforce side, from the executives you're working with on the A3 side, from the vendors and end users here at Automate, What is their perspective on these things?
Well, I think their perspective is that these technologies are only going to be used more widely in the future than they are today.
Hmm.
And we need a trained workforce that's capable of working with them. We don't graduate as many engineers as other countries like China,
Hmm.
and we don't invest in the skills needed for the jobs that are available today, even.
Absolutely.
And so at A3, we are putting a lot of effort into that. Here at Automate, we have an entire education pavilion,
Mhm.
and we have universities there to talk, and we have companies like Siemens there to
Yep.
talk. And we hope to get students at an early age interested in these technologies and give them opportunities to get the skills. There's courses available, but we have to have more. A3 is trying to develop more courses, but we have to also reach the parents
Yes.
to convince them that this is the future. You need to make sure that your children understand how to benefit from an increasingly automated future.
Absolutely, and just looking at my nieces and nephews in their in the preteens and teens at this point, how they use technology is so different than how the rest of us grew up with technology. And while I may want to go take apart something to go understand how it is, my 8-year-old nephews just think everything should be a touchscreen and they should just be able to touch the screen and everything should work. So education is very important. Chris brought up a really good point about AI, and I 100% agree. You cannot have a conversation about the future of anything without AI coming up. And I think education on the AI side is extremely important, both educating people in the current workforce about how it's not going to just go completely replace them, which I feel is the fear, especially autonomous, all of the fears, but also education on how we get people to the point of being able to do that engineering work, being able to use those tools. Jeff, on your side, are there courses available, or is there demand for those type of courses from A3, from the end user side?
Yeah, there is demand, and we do have courses we're teaching here at Automate on AI, how to get started using AI, and then advanced courses on AI. But I think you're right. I think this is critical. And I also think it matters how we talk about AI.
Yeah.
You mentioned that some people are afraid,
Hmm.
and that's totally true.
Absolutely.
But also, when I talk to people, I talk to them about what are the opportunities to make our lives better
Hmm.
that AI might enable. For
Absolutely.
instance, helping find treatments for diseases or even cures for cancers. When you talk about AI like that,
Yeah.
people understand immediately how
Mhm.
this affects their lives. This isn't just about manufacturing or logistics or anything else. This is about our lives. Can we
Absolutely.
use these technologies for good?
Mhm.
And if we can, this is a really important advance that you want to help support. On the other hand, these technologies can be used for bad things. And we have to, as people, understand it's our responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen. And so the types of things that the companies here at Automate are doing and Siemens is doing is to make sure these technologies are used to help companies become more productive and to help this society do better.
Absolutely. No, I would agree. When I talk to groups about AI, I'm a big fan of Copilot. Anyone who listens to me talk knows that I'm a big fan of the concept of Copilot and those applications. And I really see the first applications similar to robotics of 20 years ago, where we're hopefully getting rid of some of the worst parts of people's jobs and allowing them to go use their human brain in order to go do those things that are necessary as we move forward as a hopefully as a society, right?
Yeah,
Talk.
if can I just comment on
Yeah,
that for a minute?
please.
Yeah, so we talked about new technologies,
Mhm.
and where we're seeing a very good application, kind of what Jeff described is number one. I'll give you another stat.
Yeah.
So it used to be where you could train an operator on a new
Mhm.
technology, and they were good for 7 years.
Yes.
Right now, that's less than 3 years,
Mhm.
and it's probably going to be reduced less than 2 years here pretty quickly.
Mhm.
That is one application where we're working with AI. I think Jeff
Yep.
said it very well. Is we're working with them as the thought partner
Yes.
on how to leverage and adapt to this new technology. And it's more about how you're prompting
Mhm.
AI
Mm,
versus how you're
yes,
using it or really understanding it.
Yes.
yes.
And so it's critical as we introduce new technology because the only way you're going to win as we kind of move through those stages I talked about
Yep.
is you're going to introduce new technology. You're going to introduce new technology. You're going to introduce new technology. Is the only way you're going to keep up with that with the workforce we just talked about is something like Copilot, as we
Absolutely.
introduced it. So that becomes critical to kind of handle that. In learning and development, I just met with our CEO last week and asked for a significant investment because to me it's not about training anymore. Because to me, when you hear the word training,
Hmm.
that's usually a single event, right? And
Yes.
for me, it's now about learning and development. So what we're working with our customers again is we're focused on outcomes and we're
Yes.
focused on adoption. So learning and development has to be key in that. So we have to sit there. What are you doing to adapt to this new technology? What are you doing to make this a part of your DNA? Because a classroom for 3 days does not cut it anymore.
Exactly.
And so it's critical that you put these platforms. People learn differently. The mentoring, having
Yep.
AI to talk. It's multiple things that allow us to handle this learning and development and really embrace the technology. Then it's not that scary, right?
Absolutely. No,
And then
I
we can
agree.
embrace
And
it.
some of my favorite parts of that is you go in thinking there are these three applications, and day two, someone comes up with a application that will more than pay for the entire
That's right.
solution, and it is so much better than any of us could have possibly thought in the boardroom, on the executive side, or on the engineering side, because they have that enablement. I like to call it enablement.
Yeah,
And so they have that enablement, and they're able to go ahead and
that's right.
leverage whatever those
Yeah.
pieces of technology are. Talking about that transition, I want to go talk about adaptive production. And Chris, I think, can you go kind of define a bit of adaptive production and maybe compare some what we would call like traditional automation versus some of these adaptive systems, please?
Yeah, so I talked about traditional automations, fixed programming, limited ability to change.
Mhm.
Adaptives, almost the opposite of that, right?
Yes.
But what I want to go to first is when we're engaging and people say we're going to train on AI or use AI, the first place we go, and I'll give you another stat, the biggest barrier for adopting AI is poor quality data. So
100%.
68% of companies say they have poor quality data, which means if you have poor quality data, you can't adopt
Yes.
AI. And so, well, the first place we go is how are you collecting data? And usually it's like line item by line item. It's like almost like an Excel spreadsheet. And then we have to contextualize that data. So we have to create the relationships. This robot relates to this motor, relates to this sensor. So now you have some sort of intelligence in
Yes.
there. So once you do that, that's what you're feeding the large language model,
Hmm.
right? And so now when you get to adaptive and you start talking about conditions that are changing and how fast can you change here, temperatures changing, you have a certain batch that's coming in that's completely different than the one before. So how do you adjust to that batch to get a potato chip that you want,
Yep.
right? And so that's implementing that capability. That's the difference between automation, which is if you want to make a change to automation, oh my goodness, right? We got to find downtime, we got a weekend, you got to look at a holiday, change the PLC code, go down, actually physically commission it,
Yep.
validate it, all that. Versus adaptive is we're making these changes on the fly. So we're reading conditions, changing certain things on the fly to get a better quality chip, as an example. So that's to us when we talk about automation
Hmm.
versus adaptive. That's what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Jeff, coming to you again, your thoughts, your insights on the adaptive automation, right? Like are the executives, are the people here at the conference pushing towards adaptive? Do we all agree that this is the direction we need to go? Is there all positivity? Is there pushback? I feel this is the part of the conversation where we're going to probably find some more of that friction, not just operators on the plant floor, but a lot of these groups who, well, to Chris's point, hopefully have collected data so that we can go contextualize the data, but a lot of the time maybe not have even started their data collection automation journey. So, Jeff, what are you hearing about?
Well, certainly on the data collection side and the data itself, there are issues obviously with
Yep.
getting enough data and getting good data and making sense of the
Yep.
data. But even before we get there, I mean, there are companies that are ready for the next step in their automation journey, but there are many that aren't. There are
Mhm.
many small and medium sized companies out there that haven't even begun automating yet because they
Absolutely.
feel like it's too complicated, it's too costly,
Mhm.
it's for larger companies. But the reality is, we're getting to a point where these technologies are suitable, that we're
Absolutely.
making it easier to use. That is critical to adoption. And one of the things that we tell companies when they're starting out in their automation journey or they're just a little ways into it, start smart and move intelligently from there. If you try to take your most difficult problem and automate that right out of the gate, you're not going to be successful, most
Absolutely.
likely. And then you're going to have a bad taste in your mouth about automation and these technologies when the reality is you started wrong. You need to start with something that can be successful,
Mhm.
that maybe can be scaled, that you have other operations around the country or the world that can be scaled. But what you want to do is build confidence in your team being able to automate tasks. And so I think there are many levels here, like Chris said, and there are many companies who are ready to take that next step to adaptive automation. And we want to help get them there.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. I just wanted to touch on the start smart because I read that in one of the reports, and I really like that phrase, Jeff. It really stuck out. I feel most of the people working in industry have agreed for the past, I don't know, couple of decades that we should not try to just automate everything at once because we can't go take a facility down for 2 years and start over and hope to have something on the back end. So I really liked that comment. And I really hope that people go look at those smaller opportunities so that they can find that ROI and then they can go build on those successes as opposed to potentially not having that first round of success. And then it's very difficult to build on a series of failures or ideas that we do for 6 months and then we're going to go switch to something else and do that for 6 months. Chris, on your side, what are you seeing on that starting smart?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So just to make something clear, the SME business is extremely important to Siemens. In fact, 50% of our business comes from the SME market.
Yes.
So we're very in tune to what they want and what they need. When Jeff talked about start smart, it's a perfect because no matter if you're a large or small company, we always start the same way.
Yes.
It's start smart and start small,
Mhm.
prove out the technology, then scale from there.
Mhm.
So the only difference would be how much do you scale? Are you scaling to 1,000 users
Mhm.
or 1,000 machines, or are you scaling to five? It doesn't
Yes.
matter. Our
Right.
approach and the way we do this start smart and this kind of pilot phase is exactly the same. It's
Mhm.
identical. So we take all those lessons learned, whether you're small, medium, or large, it's no different. Our approach is the same. Now, the only thing I'll tell you is some of the times we run into on the SME side, they don't have large departments, right?
Yes.
And because we
Yeah.
need an investment from them. So the other thing, we have a huge partner network that we've invested in and we continue to invest in
Mhm.
to help those SME markets so
Absolutely.
they can do a lot of hand holding through the process.
Yes.
So we continue to educate our partner and continue to invest there. We also has as a service.
Mhm.
So one of the things we're constantly looking at with all our technologies, how do we provide this as a service?
Yep.
So the larger organizations, they won't adopt that. They don't
Yep.
need to. They have large partners. But the small, medium, absolutely. And we got to make sure we look out. We're here to digitally transform American industries. Full stop. That's what we want to go do. For us to be successful, we have to pay attention to the SME market. And for
Yes.
us to do that, it's what I told you. The partner ecosystem has to be extremely strong, and we have to have a lot of things as a service to help that market. And so we're focused on that. It's something we're paying attention to. We're investing a lot of R&D
Mhm.
into that place so companies can invest in this co-pilot. I told you I started this whole conversation with how these technologies change society. I talked about the history lesson, right? This will change our society. Eventually, they will. And we were at a keynote last week, and the other speaker said the same thing. They have no choice. They're going to have to adopt it, right? And so
Yes.
we just want to make sure we meet them there, wherever they're at, and so we can ensure success for those markets because that's the lifeblood of what we see and how we're going to digitally transform American industries.
Absolutely. No, that is beautiful. I love that. Thank you so much, Chris. I want to go talk about autonomous, and autonomous scares me a little. As I've said every time we've talked about bringing this whole concept of autonomous manufacturing up there. And Chris, can you paint all of the listeners a picture of what autonomous manufacturing looks like in the future, please?
Yeah, there's a few different scenarios,
Yeah.
right? But it's literally machines talking to machines. So one of the ones I always use, maybe an autonomous, is you have an AGV. Everyone knows an AGV, automated guided vehicle.
Yep.
You have an AGV that has a certain assembly that's going up, and what it does is, and it has an option to go to three different stations, as an example.
Yep.
So this AGV is talking to these three machines, saying which one is open, which
Yes.
one can I go to now, and oh, by the way, which one can achieve the things I need to achieve on my next step, and then bill a process, right?
Yes.
Operation 20, I need to do, screw this in, glue this, whatever it is, right? What station's available and what can accomplish that? It says, oh, station three is available now. Move there. They go to station three. They accomplish the task. They get a check mark. Everything's done. It gets validated, and then the same thing goes on. So that's, in a nutshell, that's a very simple use case,
Okay.
and it's actually there's some, again, CPG companies looking at doing some of that today in some of their facilities where it makes sense. But that's a simple kind of use case of
Okay.
when we talk autonomous,
Mhm.
that's what we mean by autonomous. It doesn't mean that humans aren't in the loop.
Okay.
Humans
Yes.
are in the loop, right? You have to have that human interaction because if something happens or conditions change and decisions have to be made, the other thing you didn't bring up, but is always a question on everyone's mind is what about hallucinations? And so one of the things you want to do with hallucinations, you want to validate it against a digital twin. And you want to say, we validated this against a digital twin. We should go make a change. There's a human in a loop there that says, yeah, let's go update that.
Mhm.
Let's commission that and then move on. So that still exists, even the autonomous.
Yes.
So just to demystify the, people out of you. So that's, but they're just more of a thought leader,
Yes.
right, on what's happening versus just an industrial doer, which is I have a task, I do this, I have a task, I do this. So that's just the difference. And so that's an easy example of autonomous.
That is a good example. I didn't want to bring up AI hallucinations because I feel like that would have been the entire
Yeah,
conversation
yeah.
and maybe would scare more people about the concept of autonomous. I want to probably go talk about another example, maybe, but first I want to come to Jeff. And
Okay.
Jeff, from the workforce side, right? Chris was very specific of people will need to be in the loop. It'll probably be higher paid jobs and more skilled engineers and more skilled operators, but there will almost certainly be fewer of them. So, from the workforce side, what should people think about that?
Well, I think, look, there's been fears in the United States for decades about robotics. They see the Terminator, and now they see autonomous everything and humanoids. The fears are real, except that we have to look at the opportunities
Mhm.
because what we see is a future where the jobs will be better, they'll be safer, they'll be higher paying, and I'm not sure there'll be fewer of them
Okay.
because I believe that the real threat to jobs in America or any other country is when companies can no longer compete. That's when
Yes.
all the jobs are at risk. Look, every company now is in a global competition with somebody else doing something similar. You have to be faster, you have to be
Mhm.
more reliable, more consistent, better quality. And these technologies allow you to do that. The
Yes.
real risk is if you don't employ them.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
look at the jobs that are going to exist. Instead of walking 6 miles a day in a warehouse carrying heavier boxes,
Mhm.
you can do something where overseeing it or making sense of the data. The people in the loop, they're the first person is the person who makes the decision, do we automate or not?
Yes.
Whether it's a CEO or
Mm.
somebody else, a plant manager, do we automate this or not? If they don't make that right decision or if they start with the wrong project, the whole thing falls apart. So people are going to be in the loop right from the beginning.
Okay.
But I think that these fears are mostly overblown. And again, there are risks to technologies. That's on people too. If we
Yes.
use technologies for bad things, if we have terminators, that's on us. That's not what the world looks like. And other countries aren't looking at it that
Yep.
way. These are technologies that are tools for people.
Mm.
These are not here to replace us. They're here to augment and they're here to allow us to do things, as you said, use your brain rather than your brawn, if you will.
Absolutely. I like that. We did say this would be scary, and we've gone to autonomous, we've gone to AI hallucinations, and now we've brought the Terminator into it, Jeff. So I think we've got that. I would like to come back to you, Chris, and maybe is there another example of an autonomous kind of path forward that you guys are looking and talking at? And maybe more importantly, what sort of humans in the loop do you expect as part of that?
Yeah. So I'll talk first. I want to touch on something that
Yeah.
Jeff talked about. So if you just go back to 1940, just not that far back.
Yeah.
And by the way, that was when Detroit was rocking and rolling,
Yeah.
right? So if you go back to 1940, 60% of the jobs that exist today did not exist in 1940.
Mhm.
So if you look at the glass half full,
Yep.
that's a good thing, right? So
Absolutely.
data scientists, cybersecurity, IT managers.
Yep.
I mean, these are all good things. I think that's exactly what Jeff's alluding to is there will be new jobs that will be transformed or happen as
Yep.
a result of this. And we need to embrace that. So things like prompting and these kind of things are going to become way more important than they are today. So that's on that.
Absolutely.
I'll give you an example, a customer example. So we were with a customer. I won't tell you the name, but they make chips and Cheez-Its and some other things.
Okay.
And we just completed a successful pilot with them on what they call the digital twin of dough.
Okay.
So what they're using visual inspection.
Uh-huh.
They're looking at the chip, believe it or not, and I happen to love these chips. They're looking at the chip. They're seeing the quality of the chip with visual inspection.
Okay. Yep.
And so what they do is now they take that and they process that again back to the kind of this AI large learning model. And what they say is and they look at some of the different attributes that feed into that dough. So flour, moisture, water, different sorts of water, the temperature, those kind of things. And they say based on what they're seeing in the quality and based on what's happening and what happened maybe a certain batch, is they're making adjustments
Okay.
to that without the operator. So they're making adjustments to the and they're seeing very positive results. Now, they also do it with the human in the loop.
Mhm.
So they're doing it. This is a pilot, so
Yes.
doing it as a test. But that's kind of the difference between adaptive, where you have the operator come up and say, "What's happening? What
Yep.
what should I change?" Versus more autonomous, which is they're making the changes on itself
Mhm.
and then running that through and improving the quality of the chip. So that's
Okay.
the kind of the difference between the two. And that's a customer example. We just met with their executive team talking through this digital twin of Doe, which was the first time I heard that term, but
Okay.
it was pretty cool.
This is also the first time I've heard the term, and I agree that it is absolutely very cool. Jeff, I want to come back to you. When we first started, we started talking about education, and there was the very good point about since 1940, 60% of the jobs that we're doing today did not exist.
Right.
Going back to the education side, can you maybe speak a little bit upon the need for the continued education and how the education might change? Would love to know your perspective if you think we're going to see more 4-year degrees or if we're going to see more focused, smaller, very specific technical school or other school trainings.
I think
Not
we'll
to
see.
put you on the spot.
Yeah,
Not
okay.
not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I think we'll see both.
Okay.
I think we have the need for right now. There's, I think, 500,000 or more manufacturing jobs that are open that you could go to a community college
Mhm.
or a technical school to get a certificate and be working today.
Yep.
Many of our system integrators don't have enough people to go out and install systems.
Absolutely.
So I think there'll be those jobs, but I also think there will be more higher level, higher
Mhm.
education jobs required as you need more skills. So I think both. But I think, again, if you look at the future of jobs, to Chris's point, I mean, I talk about all the time. 30 years ago, did we have a job called search engine optimization
Mhm.
specialist? There was no such thing. Did you have app developers for iPhones? No. Do we have elevator operators today? No. I mean, we have a few, but
Absolutely.
jobs change and new jobs emerge. We're really good at as humans
Yes.
is creating new jobs, creating more value. We don't want to sit around. We want to do things. We want to add value. And so we always find a way to take advantage of the new technologies, whether it's computers or the internet or robots or AI, and we will find new jobs. I would be very hopeful about that in the future.
Absolutely. With 1 minute left, guys, last closing remarks, last thoughts that you want the takeaway for the folks at home to be. We'll start with you, Chris.
Yeah, I just will reiterate, it's a journey
Yep.
and it's how you develop on that journey. It's not necessarily about the destination. And again, I think it's very important we figure out what stage you're at, whether it's the automation phase or the adaptive phase or the autonomous phase or where you want to go. And it's extremely important we're sensitive to that and we work with you as we kind of develop this roadmap moving into those different stages, because I always say every customer deserves a vision,
Hmm.
and it starts with a vision. You have to have a vision. Where do you want to go in 4 to 5 years? You
Yep.
have to. And then we need to always be working towards that vision. So and with that, we kind of ground ourselves in kind of these different stages, and there's multiple maturity levels within this stage. So for us it's important to figure out where you're at and where you want to go.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chris. Jeff, your last thoughts.
I would say these technologies are amazing. If you're not using them, if you haven't started your journey, you really should. This is why we have shows like Automate to come and meet companies like Siemens and the hundreds of other companies here who have really valuable solutions for you. So don't be afraid. Get started, learn about these technologies. If you need to have assistance, automate.org is a great resource for you.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. Again,
Thank
my
you.
name is Dave Griffith. This has been a journey to manufacturing resilience. If you guys are watching live on the A3 page, there will be a whole day today, tomorrow, and I assume Thursday of live streaming conversations like this. If you're at the show, make sure to go check out the theater next to where we are. Check out the Siemens booth, 3232. I remember that one.
Yeah, it's easy.
And we'll go see everyone soon. Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
Thank
bye.
you.
Hey, welcome back to Automate Live here at Automate in Detroit. I'm Chris Lukey with Manufacturing Happy Hour, and I'm excited to be joined by Bernd Reitel, head of R&D here in North America with digital industry and factory automation for Siemens. Bernd, great to have you here.
Thank you, Chris. Good to be here.
And I should start by saying congratulations on your new role. You were recently within marketing, and now you're back in R&D. And I think a great way to start with a bit of your personal history. You really started your career in R&D, even predating Siemens. So I'd
Yeah,
love to hear a bit about that and how it feels to be back in what feels like one of your natural type of
yeah.
roles.
All right. No, thanks. It's great to be back in R&D. So I'm working now for 29 years. I started really in R&D for 9 years out before I joined Siemens.
Hmm.
Real-time system development. Then I also went into engineering, line control systems, worked in steel plants. I built machines. I was a machine builder for a while. And so when I joined Siemens, I was in product management, responsible for a 1500 system in product management, really for the innovation from 300 and 400 to 1500 in tier portal, all of that. And for the last 6 years now, I'm in the US in
Hmm.
product management marketing and really seeing how we can apply new technologies like Edge and AI and all these co-pilots and all the other stuff, really helping customers to be more efficient and to become better in what we are doing. And it's for me now really exciting to be back in the R&D because now I can use all the knowledge that I gained here in the US, all the customers I saw, all of that feedback, take it back directly into R&D and help for us to create better products here in the US. So, and we have an R&D center. Siemens has an R&D center for PLCs and all of that in the US since 92. Took it over from TI, and colleagues developed the S7200, the 7100. I think overall by now we sold around 25 million of these pieces of PLCs for the global market. It's all developed here in Johnson City, Tennessee. And we are also looking now at VPLCs and um, Thematic X, IT-like engineering, basically the next generation of PLCs and engineering, how we can do the next step. So I'm really excited to be back and take all the knowledge about the customers here in the US also back to
Yeah.
R&D and see how we can create products in the future.
Well, let's talk about applying technology to solve problems, like you just said. As I understand, where you're focused within digital industry and factory automation, beyond the technology, and you highlighted some of these, you're helping customers improve time to market, be more efficient with their time, make existing factories more efficient. Let's dive into that last
Yeah.
one first. From a digitization and automation standpoint, how are you helping make existing factories more efficient? Maybe if you have some, specific or general examples to
Okay.
share, that can help paint the
Uh,
picture.
right. So really the first step is to make existing factories better and more efficient. And then there was also a recent study where we saw that the average tenure of a worker from 2019, it was still 20 years as the average tenure of a worker. Now after COVID, many people retiring or quitting or looking for different jobs, it's 3 years. So workers overall have less experience in a factory. So the first question is, how can we help these workers to be more efficient, to reduce the downtime and operate a machine more efficiently?
Hmm.
And this is where really all the data comes in, the IT/OT convergence,
Yep.
using edge devices to collect data, contextualize data, and then also feed data into large language models, for example, into co-pilots. And these co-pilots in turn can help the workers to be more efficient and better and make better decisions at their production line and with what we're doing. So this is really the first step. You don't have to change your plant, don't have to rip out anything, but on top of it, you use new technology to improve your existing operation.
Yeah, I like that your answer highlighted the workers first and foremost. You talk
Yeah,
about how do we help the folks with less experience. You highlighted edge devices, getting data into those LLMs,
yeah,
because at that point, then you're able to essentially give those new workers a competitive advantage and
yes.
equip them with almost some of the experience that they don't have and give them a bit of a head start.
For sure. This is really going to help them to be faster, to get up to speed faster, make better decisions, and then probably also like their job more because we just have some support while we're working. the learning period is not as long. They're not like we apprentice for such a long time.
Yeah.
And they really can work on their own, and they get more confidence because we really know what we do, and we know we have some support and really optimizing the machines and running a plant or machine in the best possible way.
Well, I know frontline workers, frontline leaders will continue to be a through line in our conversation. But my next question is, we started on existing factories. What about new factories? How do you approach this when you're starting with more of a blank slate? Because there's a lot of conversation around reshoring, bringing manufacturing back to North America, to the US. Maybe approach that last question I asked you. How are we helping improve time to market, make lives easier for the workers, help people be more efficient, factories be more efficient when you're starting from scratch? What are the strategies there?
So I think the good thing when you start from scratch is you can basically build up a plan and a strategy how to include all these new technologies and approaches right from the beginning. So first of all, for example, that you get the right data out of your factory, out of your machines. If you have an existing factory, you have to look at all the data points, you have to collect the data points. If you build a new factory, then you can build all of that in, you can integrate all of that right from the beginning. And like I said, reshoring also means, from my point of view, it means doing things differently. If we try to do everything the same way we did in the 80s or 90s, when
Yep.
basically manufacturing went out of the US and then also out of Europe, but then it's not going to work. So we have to change things. We have to be quicker in adapting factories and changing factories. This is really where also the digital twins come in. And that's also where robots come in
Yeah.
to a big degree. What you see here at Automate, really to come up with a different setup for a factory that allows you to be more agile when you see changing customer demands here in the US, but you can also adapt your factory much more quickly, and it doesn't take as long as it did before. Yeah.
Yeah, I recall during our conversation before the interview, I think you said, I could only imagine what I could have done had I had digital
Yes.
twins
Yes.
when I started my
Yes.
career.
So when I in the 90s and early 2000s was doing commissioning, engineering, programming of machines, was always you got a plan and you got an Excel list and you got an idea what the machine looked like. And the first thing you realized, first it took longer to build the machine, the end date was still the same.
Mhm.
When you saw the machine and it looked different. So you had to adapt your program, all the good ideas you had before, you had to change. And then of course, um, also optimizing a machine later on, you can only do it when you see the real machine, when you're working with it.
Mhm.
With a digital twin of a machine, I could have started optimizing the throughput, of optimizing the movements of a machine right with a digital twin in the office. I
Mhm.
don't have to sit somewhere in a production environment where
Right.
it's loud and noisy. And it's also like you come to a factory, you think it's a short thing to do, you come in at 8 and you leave like at 1 at night.
Yes.
So this is like, I think, what everybody experienced. And so that also could have avoided that. That would have saved so much time and trouble with all the simulation possibilities that are
Yeah.
out there today, just to come up with a good solution, a good program before you actually come to the machine.
Mhm.
And in turn, it shortens the commissioning time. It maybe shortens the downtime of a factory if it's just a new machine in an existing line.
Mhm.
And again, makes the operation more productive and you get more output out of it. Yeah.
Well, what I like about your reflection on your own career is it goes back to your conversation where, how do we help workers that are coming into manufacturing with less experience? And I think a real tangible way in this case with digital twins and how they help accelerate commissioning is that there's less likelihood that they're going in at 8 a.m. and then leaving at 1 o'clock in the morning, right?
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
a higher likelihood that they've knocked out some of those challenges or
Exactly.
hiccups in
Yeah,
advance, and they're getting out at 4 p.m., 5 p.m. that
exactly.
day.
That would have been awesome at that time, that to
Yeah.
get out right on time. I think that very rarely happened for me,
Yeah.
but this is really the goal, um, to test a lot of things up front
Mhm.
with digital twins, with simulation, and really have a confidence when you go in, you know it's going to work, you make your changes, you test it on a real machine, but you're already very confident, and then you can go out in time. And you still can spend the afternoon or evening with family and friends and so
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
No, great example. And one thing you also mentioned that resonated was you mentioned that reshoring means doing things differently,
Yeah.
like leveraging digital twins, like equipping the next generation with
Yep.
new technology. Let's shift this as we get to the end of our conversation to some actionable advice. we talked about, what do you do for a large factory? What do you do for a new factory? What advice would you give for how do you start small? What are the areas where, if you are just getting started with digitization and automation, how do you start small?
So I think the very first thing is to really look at well, what is the problem you want to solve, and maybe also which problem do you want to solve first. And then maybe do not pick the biggest problem you have. Pick something where you think like, okay, that's something you can swallow, where you can take on, that you can really solve in, in a let's say short time or in a fairly short time, and start with that, gain experience, learn from it, and then you can build on it, and then you can basically do your next steps afterwards. And for the workers with collecting data with edge devices, that could be one part where you start with one machine, collecting the data, getting it into a large language model, or maybe just collecting the data already helps you to get enough insights out of it, and then you put it in a large language model later on. Or also on a simulation side, maybe you don't have a 3D simulation yet, and you don't have a 3D simulation with an omniverse, but you can do a simulation, basically just write test code for your own code, or you use some smaller, a small level simulation where you can basically validate some of your code when you make changes, but it's still working as it should work. So there are also ways to start with simulation, small steps first, and then later on to expand to a 3D model with a machine that's running in real time with all of it. So start small, really think about the problem you want to solve. Don't think about the technology at the beginning. Really think about the problem you want to solve, and then choose the right technology in the right way that fits for you and fits to you to start implementing the first step.
I love how you doubled down on picking the problem to solve first. And then you gave two what I would describe as lower hanging fruit examples of, where folks can look for what those problems might look like in their setting, right? Collecting data with edge devices on one machine, getting that into a large language model, doing that on one machine before necessarily doing a whole line,
Exactly.
for example. You also talk about simulation. Start small, and then, hey, maybe move into a 3D model that's running in real time after that.
Exactly.
So, two great examples right there. One of my final questions actually came up from one of your colleagues.
Okay.
I was speaking with another individual from Siemens before this interview, and he was saying it's like, one thing that Bernd has done really well in his career is he knows how to help customers articulate their problems in ways they haven't before. And we've talked about some of this throughout this conversation, but what would your advice be to the audience? Because I think one area where people get stuck with, let's say, digitization, automation, or digital transformation is they don't really know how to drill down and articulate what their problem is. So, how do you help folks do that? And what advice would you give to folks to be able to better articulate the challenges they're trying to solve?
That, so it's a thanks to my colleague first to come up with a question. That's first what I really like is looking at the customer problems. I was a Siemens customer, and I also used other automation equipment before I joined Siemens. But I also spent a lot of our time in R&D, and I liked solving problems. And I also like solving problems in a new way, but it always starts with a problem. So first think about what is it really you want to do? And then think about, okay, what is the best way? And then, of course, it's also, we don't want to do everything the same way we did it before. So what are new ways? And then maybe what are things that didn't work in the past because maybe technology wasn't ready for it? What are things we can do differently now, but maybe that haven't worked 15 years ago? For example, how can we change things, and how can we break out of a situation where it's like, oh, we tried it before, it hasn't worked. So it's really, how can you do things differently? And but also the very first thing is, what is the problem? And then again, start small. Don't try to solve everything right from the beginning, and then see which other ways there are, and maybe also get advice from the outside, from a system integrator, from us, Siemens, other vendors. See how you can what is the best way for you to start, and then basically start your journey with digitalization.
That's a great answer. And I love how finding new ways of doing things has been a through line in this conversation. Final question as we wrap up: where can folks connect with Siemens here at Automate as well as after the show?
Well, here at Automate, it's booth, I think 3232 at Automate, not far here from from an interview booth we are
Okay.
at. And of course, Siemens, through the internet, with our sales folks out there, or also reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, and I will help you to get connected to the right people within Siemens, and we get you started on your journey.
Well, hey, thank you so much for checking out this interview. Bern, thank you so much for
Thanks,
sharing
Chris.
your experience. Great, great times across the board. We'll be back for more here at Automate Live really soon.
Thank you.